Some insults don't leave bruises, they leave echoes. Mine came on a hot July afternoon, standing in my mother-in-law's backyard. 23 people surrounded the picnic tables. Church friends, neighbors, cousins. Children running through the grass. The smell of grilled ribs and charcoal floated through the warm Tennessee air. I'd been awake since 6 that morning, marinating the ribs, mixing the potato salad, baking 2 pans of cornbread, loading everything into my truck, setting up the tables, even arranging fresh wildflowers I'd picked before sunrise. By the time everyone sat down to eat, I was exhausted. But seeing everyone smile at the food made me think maybe, just maybe, it had been worth it. Then my mother-in-law lifted her glass of sweet tea. She smiled across the table, looked directly into my eyes, and said, "Honestly, Myra, if you disappeared tomorrow, nobody here would even miss you." Silence, just for a second, then laughter. Not one person, almost everyone, my husband, his sister, his uncle, neighbors, even people from church who barely knew my name. I looked down at my plate, a hot dog, yellow mustard, a little pickle relish on the side. I picked it up, took one slow bite, then looked straight back at Pauline. "We'll see." Nobody paid attention. Someone changed the subject to football. Someone else started talking about a new truck. Within seconds, it was as if I'd never spoken, but 48 hours later, every single person sitting at that table would understand exactly what I meant. Can you imagine spending years doing everything for a family, only to realize they don't even see you? Before we continue, I'd love to know where you're watching from. I always enjoy reading your comments. And if stories about family betrayal, self-respect, and quiet revenge speak to you, I'd be honored if you subscribe to Sad Drama Stories. My name is Myra Harper. I'm 32 years old, and for 3 years, I believed love meant earning your place in someone else's family. I couldn't have been more wrong. I grew up in a tiny town called Garrison, Tennessee. 1 traffic light, 1 diner, 1 church with a roof that leaked every spring. My father worked long hours at a furniture factory until the day a forklift accident took his life. I was 19. 6 years later, cancer took my mother too. One day I was sitting beside her hospital bed. The next, I was signing paperwork with no family left to call. No brothers, no sisters, no relatives who showed up, just me, an apartment that felt too quiet, and a kitchen table where I ate dinner alone most nights. Maybe that's why, when I met Derek, I fell in love so quickly. He wasn't flashy, he wasn't rich. He simply made me feel like I mattered. We met at a county fair. He was running the ring toss booth for the volunteer fire department. On our second date, he brought me wildflowers, not flowers from a florist. Flowers he'd picked himself from the field behind his mother's house. Nobody had ever done something so thoughtful for me before. He listened when I talked. He laughed at my terrible jokes. He held my hand like he never wanted to let go after losing both of my parents. That kind of kindness felt like home. When he proposed, I didn't just think I was marrying a man. I thought I was finally getting a family. I packed everything I owned into 4 cardboard boxes, moved to Cedar Falls, started building a new life. What I didn't realize was that I wasn't joining a family. I was stepping onto a stage, and somehow, I'd become the unpaid actress in everyone else's favorite show. The monthly Smallwood family cookout had been happening for over 15 years. Rain, sunshine didn't matter. The first Saturday of every month, everyone gathered in Pauline's backyard. To outsiders, it looked wonderful. Homemade food, laughter, kids playing tag, neighbors dropping by, the perfect Southern family. What nobody noticed was who made all of it happen. Every Thursday, I ordered the meat. Friday night, I seasoned everything. Saturday morning, I baked, cooked, packed, cleaned, decorated, served. Then after everyone went home, I stayed behind to wash dishes and fold tables. Pauline, she sat in her green lawn chair greeting guests like royalty whenever someone complimented the food. She smiled proudly. "Thank you, my old family recipe." I never corrected her, even when she claimed recipes that had belonged to my own mother. Even when people praised the potato salad I'd made from memory, I stayed quiet. Because I kept telling myself, peace was more important than credit. Looking back, silence has a strange way of becoming a habit, and habits can slowly convince you that being invisible is normal. I just didn't know that this cookout would be the last one I'd ever attend. If someone had asked me during my first year of marriage whether I was happy, I would have smiled. and said yes, not because everything was perfect. Because I kept convincing myself that difficult people came with every family, that if I just loved them enough, worked a little harder, stayed a little quieter, eventually they'd accept me. I had no idea I was chasing something that was never being offered. After that first cookout, the pattern became impossible to ignore. Every month, the same backyard, the same folding tables, the same smiling faces, and somehow, the same woman pretending all my work was hers. I'd spend Friday evening preparing enough food for nearly 30 people. Saturday morning, I'd be up before sunrise, checking temperatures, loading coolers, wrapping trays in foil, making sure nothing spoiled in the Tennessee heat. By the time I arrived at Pauline's house, she'd already be sitting in that same faded green lawn chair, sweet tea in one hand, giving orders with the other. "Myra, the tablecloth's crooked. Myra, those flowers don't match. Myra, move the chairs closer together." Never. "Thank you." Can you imagine pouring your heart into something, knowing before you even start that no one will appreciate the person behind it? What hurt wasn't the work. I've never been afraid of hard work. What hurt was feeling invisible while I was doing it. One afternoon, Carol from church took a bite of the potato salad. She smiled. "Oh, Pauline, this is the best potato salad I've ever tasted." Pauline laughed proudly. "It's an old family recipe." I froze, because it wasn't. It was my mother's recipe. The same recipe she'd handwritten on a faded index card years before she passed away. Every Christmas, every 4th of July, every birthday. That potato salad had been on our table. Making it always made me feel close to her, and now someone else was claiming it as her own. I opened my mouth, then quietly closed it again. Because correcting Pauline in front of everyone felt like starting a war I knew I'd fight alone. That became my marriage, choosing silence, because silence seemed easier than conflict. Derek noticed more than people realized. I know he did. One evening I overheard Uncle Ray complimenting the auto shop's website. "Business must be booming." Derek smiled awkwardly. "Yeah, the website pretty much runs itself." I nearly laughed. Runs itself. I had built that website, designed every page, answered every customer inquiry, updated every service, managed every booking. The truth was, Derek didn't even know the login password, but I stayed quiet, again, looking back now. I wasn't protecting his feelings. I was teaching people they could erase me without consequences. Pauline hadn't always been the woman I knew. I understood that, years earlier. Her husband had suffered a terrible accident that left him permanently disabled. She'd raised 2 children while caring for him. She opened a daycare inside her own home, worked harder than almost anyone I'd ever met. I respected that. Honestly, I admired it. She had every reason to be proud of the life she'd built. The problem wasn't her past. The problem was that she'd never stopped needing to be the person everyone depended on. Then I came along, young, independent, organized, capable, and suddenly, her son started asking me for advice instead of her. I don't think Pauline ever saw me as competition on purpose, but somewhere inside her, she couldn't stand sharing the role she'd spent 20 years protecting. She didn't want a daughter-in-law. She wanted someone to serve the family without ever becoming part of it. The first Thanksgiving after our wedding proved that. I'd spent hours baking my mother's pecan pie. It wasn't fancy, just simple, homemade. The recipe had been passed down through 3 generations of women in my family. I placed it proudly on the dessert table. Pauline glanced at it, cut one tiny slice, took a single bite, then quietly carried it into the kitchen. A few minutes later, she returned holding a boxed pie she'd bought from the grocery store. When guests asked where dessert was, she smiled politely. "Oh, Myra tried, but I figured we'd serve something everyone would enjoy." People chuckled. Nobody questioned it. I felt my face burn, not because of the pie, because of how easy it had become to make me feel small. That night, as Derek and I drove home, I finally spoke. "Did you hear what your mom said?" He kept both hands on the steering wheel. After a long pause, he nodded. "I did." And another silence, finally. "She doesn't mean anything by it?" I turned toward the window. Streetlights blurred past in the darkness. "Then what does she mean?" He sighed. "You know how Mom is." There it was, the sentence that would become the soundtrack of our marriage. "You know how Mom is?" Every insult, every cruel joke, every humiliation always ended with those 5 words, and every single time, I believed next month would be different, I just didn't realize. Things were about to get much, much worse. By our second year of marriage, I had stopped asking one question. Will they ever accept me? Instead, I started asking a different one. How much of myself am I willing to lose trying? The answer changed a little every month, one cookout at a time. Brenda, Derek's younger sister, still lived in Pauline's basement. She was 28, worked part-time at the Shell station, came home just in time for dinner every night, and somehow, she treated me like I was the one living off the family. There was always something, a sarcastic comment, a fake compliment, a little laugh when Pauline criticized me, nothing big enough for people to call cruel, just hundreds of tiny cuts, and sometimes the smallest cuts leave the deepest scars. One Saturday, I carried my laptop bag into Pauline's kitchen. I'd planned to finish a client project while the cornbread baked. Brenda walked in behind me holding an open bottle of barbecue sauce. She bumped into my chair. The entire bottle spilled across my laptop bag. Bright red sauce soaked through the fabric almost instantly. She looked down, then laughed. Oh, I'm so clumsy. Not once. Did she reach for a towel? Not once. Did she say she was sorry? Pauline glanced over from the sink, smirked, then turned back to washing vegetables. I stood there cleaning the mess by myself, again. Can you imagine watching someone deliberately disrespect you while everyone else acts like nothing happened? That was the hardest part, not the cruelty, the silence surrounding it. Then there was Uncle Ray, Pauline's older brother, retired. Widowed, the kind of man who believed every insult became harmless if you laughed afterward. One afternoon, he watched me carrying 3 trays of food from the kitchen. He grinned. Well, you sure can cook. I smiled politely. Thank you. Then he added, too bad that's about all you're good for. The backyard exploded with laughter. Even people who barely knew me smiled politely, as if hurting someone counted as entertainment. I forced myself to smile, because crying would have made things even more awkward. Later that evening, I sat alone on Pauline's back steps. The sun had almost disappeared. I remember staring at the grass and wondering why I always felt lonely in a house full of people. Sometimes, being surrounded by people who don't value you feels far lonelier than actually being alone. The worst moment came that Thanksgiving. Dinner had finished. The dishes were still on the table. Pauline had enjoyed 2 glasses of wine. She leaned back in her chair, looked directly at me, and said quietly enough that only family could hear, "You'll always be a guest in this family, not a daughter." Not family, a guest. I looked at Derek. Surely, this time, he would say something, anything. He reached for the gravy boat, pretended he hadn't heard. That hurt more than Pauline's words ever could, because strangers don't owe you protection. Your husband does. When we got into the truck, I couldn't stay quiet anymore. Derek, did you hear what your mom said? He kept driving. I heard. And he sighed heavily. You know she doesn't think before she speaks. I stared at him. No, she thinks. She just knows nobody will stop her. Those words hung between us for miles. Finally, he whispered. I'll talk to her. You always say that. This time I mean it. I wanted to believe him. Honestly, I did, because hope has a strange way of surviving long after evidence disappears. Weeks passed. Nothing changed. The next cookout came, then another. Pauline still mocked me, Brenda still laughed, Uncle Ray still made jokes, and Derek stayed silent. The third time I brought it up, I finally said what had been living inside my heart for months. I don't want to go anymore. He became unusually quiet, then he looked at me with tired eyes. Myra, my mom sacrificed everything after Dad's accident. She gave up her whole life for us. I know, so please, just do this for me. Those 5 words. Just do this for me? I wish I'd understood what they really meant. He wasn't asking me to attend a cookout. He was asking me to keep sacrificing myself so nobody else would have to feel uncomfortable. Looking back now, I realized something important. There is no such thing as staying neutral when someone is being mistreated. Silence always chooses a side, and every month, Derek chose his mother's, not because he hated me, because keeping peace had become easier than protecting his wife. That realization didn't make me angry, it made me tired, the kind of tired that settles into your soul. The kind that makes you wonder how much longer you can keep pretending everything is okay. I wasn't ready to leave yet, but something inside me had quietly started preparing for the day I finally would. People always ask me one question: why didn't you leave sooner? I wish the answer were simple. I wish I could say I stayed because I loved Derek. I did love him, but that wasn't the whole truth. The truth is, leaving meant walking into complete emptiness. Both of my parents were gone. My grandparents had passed years earlier. I had no brothers, no sisters, no cousins I still spoke to, no childhood home waiting for me. No family dinners to return to. The Smallwoods, as broken as they were all I had, or at least, that's what I kept telling myself. Sometimes we confuse being needed with being loved. I certainly did. If Pauline needed groceries, I picked them up. If Derek fell behind on paperwork at the auto shop, I balanced the books. If Brenda wanted help updating her resume, I spent hours fixing it. If Uncle Ray had a doctor's appointment, I drove him because nobody else wanted to. Every problem somehow found its way to me, and every time I solved one, I convinced myself I finally belonged. Looking back, I wasn't earning love, I was earning usefulness. There's a painful difference. Can you imagine giving everything you have, only to realize people miss what you do, not who you are? Still, I wasn't completely blind. 3 months after our wedding, I'd quietly opened a separate savings account. Not because I planned to leave, because something deep inside me whispered, one day you may need a door. Every Friday, $100 went into that account. No matter what, no excuses, no skipped weeks. I never told Derek, not because I wanted secrets, because I needed one thing in my life that belonged only to me. By that July, there was just over $14,000 sitting in that account. Enough for first month's rent, enough to survive, if surviving ever became necessary. Sometimes late at night, when Derek was asleep, I'd search apartment listings in Asheville, North Carolina. I don't even know why Asheville. Maybe because the mountains looked peaceful. Maybe because nobody there knew my name. I'd scroll through tiny studio apartments, coffee shops, small art galleries, then quietly close my laptop before anyone woke up. I wasn't making plans, not yet. I was simply imagining a version of my life where I didn't wake up wondering who would embarrass me next. Then came July, the cookout, the one I'll never forget. I woke before sunrise. The ribs had marinated overnight. The potato salad was chilling in the refrigerator, my grandmother's recipe. The one Pauline introduced as her own every single month. I packed everything carefully, loaded folding tables, coolers, fresh flowers. By 8 o'clock, I was already setting everything up in Pauline's backyard. She watched from her green lawn chair, sweet tea in one hand. That tablecloth has a wrinkle. I smoothed it out. The flowers need to move. I moved them. The chairs aren't straight. I fixed them. No thank you, no smile. Just another list. By noon, 23 people filled the backyard. The ribs disappeared almost immediately. Someone from church asked Pauline what she'd put in the cornbread. A little honey, she said proudly. I looked down at my plate. I hadn't added honey. She didn't even know the recipe, but everyone nodded anyway. Then the conversation drifted toward family. Someone mentioned a cousin's newborn baby. Pauline smiled, raised her lemonade. Family is everything, people agreed. Then, she slowly turned toward me. I remember every second. The breeze stopped. Someone set down their fork. Even the children seemed quieter. Then Pauline smiled. Honestly, Myra, if you disappeared tomorrow, nobody here would even miss you. For one heartbeat, nobody moved. Then the laughter started. Derek, Brenda, Uncle Ray, neighbors. Even the church couple who'd spent the last 10 minutes praising the food I'd cooked. Every laugh landed like another stone. I looked at the hot dog on my plate, picked it up, took one slow bite, then looked directly into Pauline's eyes. We'll see. That was all I said, nothing more. Nobody understood those 2 words, not yet, but sitting there, listening to everyone laugh, something inside me became unbelievably calm. Not angry, not hurt, calm. Because for the first time in 3 years, I finally stopped wondering whether things would ever change. I knew they wouldn't, which meant I would have to. That night, after Derek fell asleep on the couch, I quietly stood in the kitchen, looking at the wedding ring on my hand, and for the very first time, I slipped it off. I stood in the kitchen for almost 10 minutes, holding my wedding ring in the palm of my hand. It looked exactly the same gold band, the same tiny diamond Derek had slipped onto my finger 3 years earlier. But somehow, it no longer meant the same thing. People think marriages end with screaming, with slammed doors, with dramatic arguments. Sometimes they end in complete silence. I carefully placed the ring inside the small wooden jewelry box my mother had given me years before she died. Then I closed the lid. That tiny sound felt louder than anything Pauline had ever said to me. The next morning, Derek found me making coffee. He smiled. "Asleep on the couch again?" I smiled back politely. Neither of us mentioned the ring. He hadn't noticed it was gone. That realization hurt more than I expected. Can you imagine removing your wedding ring? And the person who promised to love you forever never even notices for the next 2 days. I didn't argue. I didn't cry. I simply prepared. While Derek was at work, I packed one box at a time, not everything. Only the things that truly belonged to me: my mother's handwritten cookbook, old family photographs, the quilt she'd sewn before she became sick, my laptop. Important documents, a few pieces of jewelry, nothing Derek had ever given me. I wasn't trying to punish him. I was trying to leave with a clear conscience. Every item I wrapped reminded me of a different version of myself. The girl who believed marriage meant safety, the woman who kept choosing silence, the wife who waited years for someone to finally defend her. I folded each memory into a cardboard box and quietly let it go. By Wednesday, everything was ready. The apartment in Asheville had already approved my application. A small one-bedroom above a local bookstore, nothing luxurious, old hardwood floors, tiny kitchen, a balcony just big enough for 2 chairs. The moment I saw the pictures, something inside me relaxed. It wasn't about the apartment, it was about possibility. For the first time in years, I could imagine waking up somewhere without feeling anxious. That afternoon, I drove to the bank, transferred my savings, then stopped by the attorney's office. Mrs. Collins had practiced family law for nearly 30 years. She listened without interrupting. I told her everything: the cookouts, the insults, the stolen credit, the constant humiliation, Derek's silence. When I finished, she quietly asked, "Did he ever defend you?" I thought carefully. Minutes passed. Finally, I answered honestly, "No, not once." Saying those 2 words out loud changed everything, because excuses sound believable until you summarize them in one sentence. Mrs. Collins nodded. "You already know what you want. I think you've known for a long time." I left her office carrying divorce papers, not signed yet, but ready. That evening, Pauline called. Her voice sounded unusually cheerful. "Myra, we're having another barbecue this weekend. I need your potato salad." I almost laughed, not because it was funny, because after everything she'd said, she still assumed I'd show up, still assumed I'd cook, still assumed I'd keep proving her wrong by staying. Funny how some people mistake kindness for permanent availability. I answered calmly, "I won't be there." Silence. "What do you mean, I won't be coming?" She laughed. "Oh, don't be dramatic. Everyone says things they don't mean." I looked around the living room. Half the shelves were already empty. Cardboard boxes lined the hallway. The house no longer felt like home. It felt like somewhere I used to live. "I'll make other plans." Before Pauline could answer, I ended the call. No argument, no explanation, just peace. About an hour later, Derek came home carrying groceries. He walked into the kitchen, looked around, then frowned. "Why are there boxes?" I took a slow breath because I knew the next conversation would change both of our lives forever. I looked into the eyes of the man I'd once believed would always protect me, then quietly said, "We need to talk." His smile disappeared instantly, and for the first time, he realized something was terribly wrong. Derek stared at the cardboard boxes for several seconds, then looked back at me. "What is all this?" I pulled out one of the dining room chairs. "Sit down." My voice was calm, almost too calm. He didn't move. "Myra, you're scaring me." I gave a small, tired smile. "I've been scared for 3 years." He slowly sat across from me. The kitchen suddenly felt much smaller than it had ever felt before. For a long moment, neither of us spoke. Sometimes, the hardest conversations begin with silence. Finally, I slid a folder across the table. He opened it. The first page was the apartment lease. The second, divorce papers. His face turned pale. "No," he whispered, "no." "You're serious?" I nodded. "I've never been more serious." He looked at me as if he didn't recognize the woman sitting across from him. "This is because of Mom." I took a slow breath. "No, this is because of you." He blinked. "What? I never expected your mother to love me." I expected my husband to protect me. His mouth opened, then closed again. Can you imagine finally telling someone exactly how deeply they've hurt you, only to realize they never understood your pain in the first place? I always defended you, he said quietly. I looked at him. No, you defended peace. There's a difference. He rubbed both hands across his face. I didn't want everyone fighting, so instead, I fought alone. The words hung between us, heavy, impossible to ignore. He looked around the room, the missing photographs, the empty bookshelves, the sealed boxes. Only then did he notice something else. Myra, where's your ring? I looked down at my left hand. I took it off 4 days ago. His shoulders dropped. You took it off. You didn't notice. He didn't answer because he couldn't. The silence said enough. For the first time since we'd married, he had no explanation, no excuse, no, you know how mom is. He quietly began crying, not loudly, not dramatically, just silent tears sliding down his face. I'm sorry, I know, I should have stopped her. Yes, I should have said something. Yes, I didn't think. I gently interrupted him. Exactly, you didn't. There wasn't anger in my voice anymore, only exhaustion. Because forgiveness becomes difficult when someone apologizes for something they had years to change. That evening, he asked one question. Can we fix this? I looked toward the living room, toward the empty walls where our wedding photos had once hung. I spent 3 years trying. Now it's your turn. The next morning, I loaded the last box into my truck. The jewelry box holding my wedding ring rested on the passenger seat. I didn't leave a dramatic letter. I didn't take revenge. I simply locked the front door, placed the house key on the kitchen counter, and drove away. Asheville welcomed me with rain, soft mountain rain, the kind that makes everything smell clean. My tiny apartment wasn't perfect. The floors creaked. The windows were old. The kitchen barely had enough space for one person. But when I unlocked that door, for the first time in years, no one was waiting to criticize me. No one told me I'd arranged flowers the wrong way. No one laughed at my cooking. The silence there didn't feel lonely. It felt peaceful. A week later, Saturday arrived. For the first time in years, I wasn't standing in Pauline's kitchen before sunrise. Instead, I sat on my little balcony with a cup of coffee, watching clouds drift across the Blue Ridge Mountains. Around noon, my phone started vibrating again and again and again. Brenda, Pauline, Uncle Ray, even neighbors. I ignored every call. Finally, a voicemail appeared from Pauline. Her voice sounded nothing like it usually did. Myra, where are you? Everyone's here. No food's ready. The meat's still frozen. The tables aren't even set up. She paused, then quietly added, We didn't know how much you actually did. I stared at the mountains for several seconds, then deleted the voicemail without replying, because some lessons can only be learned through absence, and Pauline's biggest lesson was only beginning. I didn't answer a single phone call that Saturday, not Pauline's, not Brenda's, not Uncle Ray's, not even Derek's. For the first time in years, I chose peace over guilt. I made myself breakfast, opened every window in my little apartment, and let the mountain air drift inside. It felt strange, not because I missed them, because I wasn't waiting for someone to criticize me. Can you imagine waking up one morning and realizing your heart isn't heavy anymore? That's exactly how freedom felt. Around 3 that afternoon, my phone buzzed again. This time, it was Derek, a text message. Mom's cookout fell apart. I stared at the screen. Then another message arrived. Nobody knew your recipes. Another, the ribs burned. The potato salad never got made. The desserts didn't happen. Half the guests left early. Then one final message. I never realized you were holding everything together. I quietly locked my phone because the point was never for them to fail. The point was simply for them to finally see the truth. Over the next few weeks, the calls became less frequent. Then, one afternoon, someone knocked on my apartment door. When I opened it, Derek was standing there. He looked different, not older, just humbled. He held a small paper bag in one hand. Inside were wildflowers, the same kind he'd picked for me on our second date. For a second, my heart remembered the man I'd fallen in love with, but memories and reality are not the same thing. I found your address through Mrs. Collins, he said quietly. I hope that's okay. I nodded. What do you want, Derek? He looked down at the flowers. I finally talked to Mom, and I told her she was wrong. I waited. He swallowed hard. I told everyone. I told them they laughed while my wife was being humiliated. I told them I stayed silent. I apologized. There were tears in his eyes, real tears, not because he'd been caught. Because he finally understood. I should have protected you. Yes. I failed you. Yes. If I could go back, I gently interrupted him. But you can't. Silence filled the doorway. After a long moment, he nodded. I know. He handed me the flowers. I don't expect you to come back. I just needed you to know you were never invisible to me. I looked into his eyes, then quietly answered. I wasn't invisible, Derek. You just kept pretending you couldn't see me. He closed his eyes. Those words hurt him. I know they did, because they were true. He turned and walked toward his truck. Halfway there, he stopped. Without looking back, he said, I hope one day someone loves you the way I should have. Then he drove away. That was the last time I ever saw him. 6 months later, life looked completely different. I had opened a small catering business, using my mother's recipes, the recipes Pauline had always claimed as her own. Funny enough, people didn't just love the food, they loved the story behind it. My business grew faster than I'd ever imagined. Soon, I wasn't cooking for 23 people anymore. I was catering weddings, community events, corporate dinners, and every single menu carried one small sentence at the bottom. Made with recipes passed down through generations and served with respect. One afternoon, I received a letter, no return address. Inside was a single handwritten note. It was from Pauline. I spent years believing people needed me. I never realized. We all needed you. There was no request for forgiveness, no excuses, just the truth. I folded the letter, placed it inside my mother's old cookbook, and smiled. Not because everything had been fixed. Some things never are, but because healing doesn't always come from hearing the words, I'm sorry. Sometimes, healing comes from finally believing you deserved better all along. If there's one thing this journey taught me, it's this. Never stay where your kindness is treated like obligation. Never mistake silence for love. And never let anyone convince you that your value depends on how much you sacrifice for people who refuse to appreciate you. The people who truly love you will never ask you to disappear just to make them comfortable. If this story touched your heart, I'd love to hear from you. Have you ever been the person everyone depended on, but no one appreciated until you were gone? Share your story in the comments. Someone reading it might realize they're not alone. And if you enjoy emotional family dramas, inspiring stories of courage, and unforgettable journeys of self-respect and justice, I'd be honored if you subscribe to Sad Drama Stories. Thank you for watching, and remember, sometimes the bravest thing you'll ever do is quietly walk away and finally choose yourself.